have you here, and thank you so much for taking the time to come and visit us. I mean, all of you, except some people were not here before, yes?
I've never been here.
Never been, okay.
Well, most of us have never been here.
Yes. So then I have to tell the story.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That's why we're here.
So my name is Daoud, and Daoud is David. And I will tell you something about what is happening here. We are, first, just to give you the context, we are in an area which is southwest of Bethlehem, around 6 miles. The land is located on the top of the hill, about 3,000 feet above sea level, 950 meters high above sea level. From here we have a nice view to the west, and we could see the Mediterranean from here. We are in an area which is considered to be Area C after the Oslo agreements. And Area C, as you know, is making more than 60% of the West Bank and is totally under Israeli control. That means, in reality, as Palestinians, we are not in charge of land, we are not in charge of resources, and we are not in charge of our own borders. And that's why it is becoming very difficult, if not impossible, to talk about an independent Palestinian state. Now, the biggest obstacle we are facing is the continuation of land confiscation and the expansion of the Israeli settlements in the occupied territories that are built according to a long-term plan to divide the Palestinian cities and villages from each other, which will make it impossible to talk even about an independent state. Now, this is the political context we are in here. Now, we are as a family, as many other Palestinian families, we are affected by land confiscation. We own this land since 1916, like more than 100 years ago. My grandfather bought this piece of land. He was a farmer, and he used to make wine. So he wanted a big land for that. It was during the Ottoman period, and the Ottomans wanted to get property taxes. So they said Palestinians should register land in order to pay taxes. Now, many did not do it for many reasons, of course, why to pay them taxes. And of course, like everybody knows, this is my land, so why do I need to prove it on paper? Now, my grandfather at that time did two unusual things. The first thing he did, he registered the land. So we got papers from the Ottomans. And then my father and uncle kept re-registering the land during the British, the Jordanians, and the Israelis. The other unusual thing the family did, they lived on the farm in a cave. And this is where my father and uncle grew up. Connected, we have another, I will show you the family cave. So on the land, so my father and uncle came as young boys, grew up here, and it was on purpose because my grandparents wanted their children to be connected with the ground from the beginning. And by the way, it was unusual. So we are not living on our farms, usually. We live in communities and biblically. Like when you talk about biblical stories, you know that people were not living on their farms at that time. But my grandfather wanted the other way. So after my grandparents died, my father and uncle took over, continued farming the land, living in caves until they passed away. And we as children and grandchildren, we grew up with the same connection to the land. I mean, not born in a cave or grew up in a cave, but from the beginning connected with the ground. Now, the second chapter of our story started in 1991, as we heard by chance, of course, like after 1967, you know, like the Israeli settlements in the occupied territory. And now, as an example, we find ourselves now in a ring of 5 Israeli Jewish settlements that are growing to become huge cities. You know, the biggest, Bitar Alit, you've seen that. It has, according to the Israeli statistics, more than 50,000 people living in it. So it's becoming more difficult because children were born there, grew up there, got married, and have their own children. So it is becoming their home. And day by day, year by year, it's getting more complicated for us in even talking about a state. Now, as we heard by chance, the Israeli military authorities wanted to confiscate the last Palestinian hilltop in our area. We said this is our land and we have the documents. So we challenged that. We went to the military court because we are under the Israeli military control, and our lawyer presented copies of the documents. Of course, the Israeli military judge was shocked to see papers. We're not expecting us to have documents, but instead of closing the case as in a normal legal and just system, they postponed it. Yes. And they started to make it difficult for us to prove ownership because of our location. So they started to say, okay, you have documents, but the land must be surveyed again. We have an old map, an old land survey, goes back to 1922. They said it was done by hand. You need one that is done by computer, GPS and so on. We've done that. In order to be recognized, it must be signed by all neighbors. And they gave us 35 days time to do it. It was very hard to convince our neighbors to sign on our map to prove our ownership to the land. We've done that. Then they said
which neighbors?
Palestinian neighbors. Yes. But it was very hard to convince, and like land is being divided and who is the owner of this piece and that piece, you know. But we managed to do it. And then they said we need eyewitnesses. We need people who lived here, farmed the land, and one time we brought 50 people to the Supreme Court, to the military court. We were standing 5 hours under the sun, and then a soldier came out and he said, we have no time to talk to you today, come tomorrow. I mean, those are examples. So we've been going through that for 12 years until 2002, and then our lawyer got a paper, a fax from the military court, 2 sentences. It says that the family does not have enough proofs of ownership. You know, so we knew that it was taken for political reasons, so we did not give up. We brought this case to the Supreme Court, the highest court in Israel. Now, Palestinian lawyers from the West Bank cannot represent Palestinians in front of the Supreme Court. We hired a Palestinian lawyer from Jerusalem who is still representing us until today. So to make the story short, we are struggling until today since 26 years. We spent more than $200,000 on legal expenses, thanks to all people who helped also financially to that cause. But if we want to talk about it from the positive perspective, we are still here, and we did not lose any part of the land. Okay. Now, parallel to the legal things, we had difficulties from settlers who came here. They tried to put us under physical pressure in order to give up and leave. So they came and cut our trees. They threatened us with guns. They tried to build roads on our property. And one time in the year 2002, they tried it again with big bulldozers to build the road, because they start with the road and they put a water tower and a container, and then they can establish an outpost that becomes a settlement. But we always went legally, and we stopped them by court. And we've done that like 3 days after starting working there. And the settlers were very angry because we stopped them, and they destroyed 250 olive trees from our property. Now, an olive tree is like a member of the family. It's like a holy tree for us. We managed to plant new trees 3 weeks later, sponsored by a Jewish organization from England called European Jews for Just Peace in Palestine, who heard about our story, decided to sponsor 250 olive trees, and they came and planted them. So this was for us a sign of hope that we are not alone in the struggle for justice. The journey continued with violence, so we had a big destruction of our fruit trees in the valley in the year 2014, this time from the military. We planted hundreds of fruit trees, and they claimed, we found a piece of paper on the farm down there, and they claimed that those trees were planted 10 years ago on what is called state land. Although we went to the court, we presented our documents, and our appeal was accepted, but 2 weeks later, and without a court decision, 3 big bulldozers came to the farm, destroyed all our fruit trees just 10 days before the apricot harvest. It was on the 19th of May 2014. It was a catastrophe for us because this is something that we did not expect to happen, because we thought it's secured, we are in court, and this action was done without a court decision. That means we have the right to be compensated. The first thing we did, we responded legally. So we have 2 court cases going on against the military, one in front of the military court and the other in front of the Supreme Court. Nothing heard in the court until today. But on the ground, we managed to repair the terraces and we planted new trees. Many people came and sponsored and planted trees. Among them was American Jewish group who came here for 1 week, helped in planting trees, and then they went back home motivated. They established a new organization called the Jewish Center for Nonviolence, and they came back last year visiting us with 50 people, and last May they came with 150 people.
That's amazing.
So what we want to say here is all things will go well for the people who love God.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes we don't know why it's happening, but then when we think about it after it happened, we realize that it could be a blessing for other people. So the second strategy, which was the physical pressure, did not work. We are still here. Then they tried to buy the land from us, and the last offer was an open check. How many millions you want for this place? But our answer was with the same answer that Naboth did. This is an Old Testament story. You know, do you know the story? Naboth's vineyard, yes? Yes, yes, exactly. So there was a king called Ahab in the north, near Samaria, like Nablus today. And Naboth, the farmer, he used to have a vineyard close to his palace. So the king, he thought he is in power. He was in power, so he could do whatever, you know. But first, he wanted to he asked Naboth, I want your vineyard to make it as vegetable garden, because it's close to my farm, to my palace. He didn't, he refused. He offered him another piece of land, probably much better than his own. But Naboth at that time refused the generous offer. Why? Because here, you know, like our mentality is we are, what we call it home is the place we were born and grew up. And we talk about it as a specific place, not even a city, even specifically where exactly in that area, you know. Then the king offered them also an open check, and the answer was, what we inherited, we cannot sell. You know, like when you receive something, when you inherit something, you didn't work hard for that, and a gift you receive cannot be sold. And this was our answer. Now we are becoming more isolated. This is the fourth strategy they're using. The road is blocked since 2001, since the beginning of the second Intifada. Always, they say, for security reasons. Now, the other problem with isolation is the building of the new school, the new religious school. They started last May, and they started building last year in May, and they started the first day of school the 1st of September. So they have now students, like young people, coming to study here. Now, we have a problem with religions in general, because religions are being misused, not only by Jews, by Christians, and by Muslims. In the name of God, you can do whatever. Now, the other problem is that we are afraid that this school might be visited by radical settlers who come with the ideology God promises the land. So they have the gun in one hand and the Bible, and argue with divine rights to the land. So they might come and attack us here, and probably the road might be closed completely and permanently for us. Now, the third problem is the wall. I mean, we have two problems with the wall. The first problem is with isolation, with, you know, like, let us say with separation, we create more enemies, we create more hatred. But the other problem is that the wall is not being built at the border between the West Bank and Israel. In many places, it is separating Palestinians from Palestinians and Palestinians from their own land. So they are planning to build a wall to the south and southwest of Bethlehem. And when the wall is completed, we will be here on the Israeli side of the wall. That means the wall will disconnect us from going easily to Bethlehem. And this is a situation is affecting not only us as a family, many other Palestinians who will be like in an enclave between the green line and the wall, which day by day won't be possible to exist when people are isolated. Now on the ground, we have restrictions here. We are not allowed to build anything. We have so far 22 demolition orders for structures we built without a permit, they claim, and including tents. Although we apply for a building permit, always denied without any reasons by the military, then we bring it to the Supreme Court. And last September, on the 19th of September, we had a court session in the Supreme Court after we brought all those demolition orders in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, and this is not the first time, like Pilate washing his hands, they returned it back to the military. Yeah. So, and now the military demanded us to apply again for a building permit, and we were given 60 days time to do it, and the last day will be the 19th of November. So we have to apply again. That means the land must be surveyed again, and to work with an engineer to prepare the paperwork for a building permit that we will never get. This is a process that is going to cost us about $10,000, and we know the answer from the beginning. They would say no, and then we apply again in the military court again, and they will say no, and we will apply the third time, and they will say no, and then we will bring it again to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will return it back to the military court to start the process from below zero. This is a big frustration for us, but we are doing that in order to avoid any destruction of our structures. Now, this is a story that is affecting many other Palestinians. It's not the family only, our family story. Now, I always say when people live under difficult political reality, when they have no hope for the future, when they are provoked by violence, are pushed to the corner, they normally react with three options. The first normal response is also violence. But we said violence is creating more violence, will create more hatred, will create more bitterness, and will create more enemies. So no to the first option. Now we came to the second normal option, which is to resign, to sit down and cry and become a victim. And probably this is the case with the majority of the Palestinians. What can we do in this very difficult reality? Politically, we are weak, isolated, no hope, nothing happening, on the political level. Internally, we have also some issues here, some problems. And at the end, this situation will force many Palestinians to sit down, and cry and wait for a political Messiah to come for salvation. So this might happen, but this might not happen. But this we would become passive if we act that way, and we will fall in the victim mentality. And we said it is dangerous to feel as a victim. So no to the second option. Then we were left with the last option, which is to run away, to leave. And this is the case with the best educated Palestinians. And if we want to talk about Christians, because here we are the only Palestinian and Christian remaining family in this area. Now, if we want to talk about that side, also running away is not a solution. We will feel defeated by our own challenges. So no to the third option. So we were stuck there. What to do? We are against violence, against resignation, and against giving up and leaving. So we started to say there must be another way of resistance, but without violence. And when we said without violence, that means we had to fix ourselves, we had to believe in what we are doing. And that's why we said 4 important things that became our principles before developing what we call it now the fourth way. So the first thing we said, we refuse to be victims. Although we have the right to be victims in this city vision. But refusing to be victim is important in order to start acting instead of reacting, and so start acting differently. Secondly, we said we refuse to hate, and no one can force us to hate. Easy said, difficult to practice, but we believe that every human being is created in the image of God and is not created to hate the other. So in every human being there is the good and the bad. Even in what you call the enemy, there is something good. So we have sometimes to dig for it. It's buried deep. So we want to respect the good, but not to accept the bad. We want to stand up for our rights and tell the other what you are doing is unjust. Thirdly, we are acting differently because this is what we believe in. What we believe. So our faith is the center of our way of nonviolent resistance. And fourthly, we said we are people who believe in justice. And we believe that one day justice will prevail and we will see the sun of justice rising again, sooner or later. So after we said that, we were empowered, we stood up, and we walked on a different path, and we created here another way of resistance. We created a non-violent, a creative, a constructive way, because we believe here we cannot overcome evil with more evil. We have to do it the other way. Hatred, not with more hatred, but with love. Darkness with light, and our slogan is, we refuse to be enemies. Refusing to be an enemy is not a passive, but an active way of nonviolent resistance. And under that slogan, we created the Tent of Nations with the idea to invest the frustration we have positively. Because when people get frustrated, they become angry, and when they become angry, they react negatively. This is normal. Here we are frustrated, we become angry, but we try to channel our pain and invest our anger in a positive way. This is our therapy. We are committed to nonviolent resistance, and that's why we are going all the way legally in the Israeli court system, although it is unjust for us. And then we said we want to open the farm for people to come and see. Come and see, go and tell. And we're not here to argue with people. Like when you remember when Nathanael was called to be a disciple of Christ, he was sitting under a fig tree. And Philip came to him and he said, we find the Messiah. Where is he coming from? Nazareth. You know the story, nothing good comes out of Nazareth. He did not argue. He said, come and see. And this is an invitation also to Israeli people. Come and see. Many Israelis, they don't know or they don't want to know how we live as Palestinians. Come and see is a responsibility. Then to go and tell. Or don't do anything, but please do not tell me I didn't know. So with this way of nonviolent resistance, also we started to see all our problems and big challenges as small obstacles. So how can we develop the farm without electricity, water, and a building permit? We said nothing is impossible. If there is a will, there will be always a way. So for electricity, we installed a solar power system, the first in Palestine, and we are since then independent in terms of energy. The system got a demolition order, of course, but we managed to save since 2009 until today probably more than 80 to 90,000 US dollars on fuel expenses. What about water? No running water. We depend on rainwater collected in systems. No building on the ground. We started building under the ground, renovating existing caves. This is one of 7 caves renovated. And this is done by children during one of our summer camps. And the title was Peace, Justice, and Conservation of the Creation. The children painted the shadow. So, I mean, it's not about water, electricity, or a building permit. It's about showing other people, and especially Palestinians, that things are possible. Wherever you are, And under any circumstance you live, you are able to make a difference. So don't sit down, don't cry, and don't become a victim. Stand up and act. And when you are acting differently and positively, you motivate yourself. You motivate other people, not through telling them what to do, through doing what you are doing, and you confuse the other. And this is what we are doing here. So life is receiving and giving, and that's why we started developing the farm and bringing people to this place to send them back home with a message of hope in a hopeless situation. Wherever you go and hear, you hear difficult stories, that makes us all frustrated and depressed and sitting down and saying, where to start? What can we do? No, here is the place of hope. Of course, this reality is very difficult, but there is a lot that can be done. So that's why we want to empower people to go back home and not just deal with Israeli-Palestinian issues, justice and peace here, also in your own communities, to be peacemakers in your own communities. We do a tree planting campaign every year. We invite people to sponsor and plant trees, because when we plant a tree, we believe in the future, and especially an olive tree. We make the land productive, but also if we want to talk about peace, we learn that peace should grow from the ground and up like an olive tree. We have children's summer camp activities here in the summertime. In July, we work with 50 children from Bethlehem area, from refugee camps, both Christians and Muslims. They are traumatized. They're growing up in a very difficult political situation, reality. And it is very hard to motivate them through telling them what to do. So we focus here on creativity, creative workshops like paintings, mosaic, music, theater, because what we want to achieve here, to let the children discover their talents, to let them focus on their positives, and let them believe in themselves. I am able to make a difference. I am able to shape my future by myself. We have a women empowerment project in the Palestinian village down the valley, Nahalin, run by my wife, Jihan, who is a computer teacher. She started this project to offer a space for women in the village who do not have chances for education for many reasons. So she's working with 15 to 20 women in a year, like a school year, starting in September, ending in June. And she's offering computer classes, English classes, agricultural training, first aid courses, art projects with other volunteers. And the idea is, it's not about education, it's about empowerment. Because we are down as Palestinians. We feel there is no hope for the future. We always invested our hope in others, and we were frustrated. We were, frustrated, because of that. And that's why it's important for us now to believe in ourselves, to stand up and walk our way and know what we want to achieve, and invite other people to walk with us, backing us, but also doing it our way and not the way. So we have harvest camps in June, the apricot, July, the almond, the grapes in August. In September we have the fig harvest, and yesterday we finished the olive harvest. So we have always international presence of visitors and volunteers here. And since we started to have international presence of volunteers since 2002 until today, we have no attacks from Israeli settlers. So your presence here is making a big difference. So the journey continues, of course. So we have a big vision, and our vision is one day to establish a educational environmental center here for children who are not learning that much about environment. We believe we have many other problems besides political problems, but we always believe as Palestinians, first, if we will get a state, and then all our other problems will be solved automatically. No, why not to invest in the new generation, to make it possible for them to stand up and be responsible, and continue the journey for justice. So our journey will continue with 3 key words here, with faith, love, and hope in action.
You're an inspiration.